and then we will have the panelists reply to the questions. Of course, you can already start asking and writing your questions while the discussants are speaking, and we will collect them in the meantime and then use them in the Q&A section. So please feel free to pose your questions as you think of them. So we got the European Commission's enlargement package on October 19. The enlargement package offered a comprehensive assessment of the state of play and the progress made by the Western Balkan countries in their individual path, the individual processes of accession to the European Union. And of course, a strong focus on fundamental reforms is being kept with the introduction of the new methodology, even strengthened compared to before. The event today serves to unpack the enlargement package and to discuss it with the region's think tanks and civil society organizations. We are really happy to have with us Mr. Maciej Popowski, Acting Director-General for Neighbourhood Policy and Enlargement Negotiations in DG NEAR, who will present the enlargement package in the beginning, and after that we will have short, up to 5 minutes reactions from the representatives of the Think for Europe network as experts and experienced participants in their countries and in the region's EU accession process. To kick off the discussion, we have a lineup of first, to start with Srđan Majstorović, Chairman of the Governing Board of the European Policy Center, CEP in Belgrade, Ardita Bazi-Imeri, Program Coordinator, European Policy Institute, EPI Skopje, Haris Čutahija, Researcher in the Foreign Policy Initiative in Sarajevo, Marko Sošić, Policy Analyst in the Institute Alternative in Podgorica, Đerđi Vurmo, Program Director in the Institute for Democracy and Mediation in Tirana, and Arbreša Lođa Stubla, Executive Director and Senior Research Fellow in the Group for Legal and Political Studies in Pristina. My name is Milena Lazarević. I'm a co-founder and Program Director of European Policy Center in Belgrade, and I will be your moderator for today. So, how does the Enlargement Package 2021 support building a stronger Europe? What are the incentives that are being offered to the Western Balkans through this package? Does the current toolkit include both tools to deal with the region's sensitive but complex issues and at the same time address all the issues related to fundamentals? What are the assessments made by the European Commission, and what are the reactions in the region? To kick off, I'm giving the floor to Mr. Popowski to give an introductory presentation of the package, after which we will continue with the discussion. Mr. Popowski, please.
Thank you very much, Milena. It's a pleasure to see you again. Well, so that's the mother of all packages from the point of view of DG NEAR. I mean, certainly a highlight of the year. That came at a particular juncture. Just less than a month after the regional tour of President von der Leyen, who visited all the countries in the Western Balkans, and a week, it was adopted a week after the Brdo summit with the Western Balkans, which was another sign of our commitment to the region, because we really want to. We are the bearers of the flame, and we want to maintain the dynamics of the enlargement process against all odds, because it's not always easy, and I'm sure we'll talk about it during the discussion. You mentioned the reactions in the region. Maybe I'll start with that, because it was a very mixed picture. So in short, we didn't make anybody entirely happy, which means we've done a good job, because this is a very balanced report based on a solid methodology and drawing on a variety of different sources, official and not. I mean, you know, we always work together with our delegations, with member states, embassies, with international organizations like OSCE, Council of Europe, NATO, with civil society, NGOs. So it's really, I mean, there is no shortage of data, and I think the assessment we present is really balanced and objective. Indeed, the novelty this year is that it was the first reporting year during which we based ourselves entirely on the new enlargement methodology that was adopted in 2020, and that rests on 4 pillars, if you will. So more credibility, more predictability, more dynamism, and a stronger political steer. There are other adjustments to the methodology. One is the clustering of chapters, and it's not only for the optics of it. Indeed, they are clustered in a logical way. So bringing together chapters that are relevant for a certain section of the acquis, like green economy and connectivity, for instance. And then again, we put once again, or perhaps even more than before, major focus on the fundamentals. So the famous chapters 23, 24, that will remain on the table, remain open for as long as the accession negotiations are ongoing. And of course, we will regularly revisit them to see how much progress has been made by each and every individual country, because that would enable us to make progress on other chapters. There is, of course, a strong element of conditionality, and the whole process is merit-based. Well, we use our usual benchmarks from substantial progress to no progress, and there's a lot in between. So some progress, limited progress, or even very limited progress, because we wanted to be as precise as possible. And I'm not going to read out to you the whole list of benchmarks for each country, because that would take 2 hours. But I just wanted to recall the main conclusions. And interestingly, even though the report is based on the new methodology, the conclusions are not fundamentally different from last year, because last year there was no agreement among the member states on the way ahead. Unfortunately, I had to say, we were very close, and then it didn't happen. So first of all, we once again stated very clearly that North Macedonia and Albania have fulfilled all the necessary conditions for the opening of the accession talks. Therefore, the negotiating frameworks for both should be adopted as soon as possible. So we still keep it on the agenda. I don't want to speculate right now on when it's going to happen, because we are not there yet. But the conclusion by us, by the Commission, is very clear. And that was very much also in the mind of President von der Leyen when she was in the region. When she came back, she was convinced that's the right thing to do. Not least, if I may add a side remark, because of the sense of disillusionment and disappointment in the region, probably more profound in Skopje or Tirana, but it has an impact on all the countries in the region. So we need to counter that, and we don't want to lose the countries. We don't want to lose the people of the Western Balkans. So that was the first important conclusion. Then the report recognizes the importance to move forward with the accession negotiations with Montenegro and Serbia. Again, there is a difference. So Montenegro, all chapters have been opened already, even though Montenegro has decided to opt into the new methodology. So from now on, their accession talks will be guided by the new methodology. And so for Montenegro, the immediate task for the next couple of months is to make sufficient progress on the interim benchmarks. on the fundamentals, on the rule of law, judiciary, functioning parliamentary system. Yesterday, Commissioner Varhelyi discussed it with Prime Minister Krivokapić, and today I discussed it with the chief negotiator of Montenegro. So we have high expectations, but it's possible. So we are now preparing for the intergovernmental conference with Montenegro. That would be the message, and that's what we would like to hear from the government in terms of reassurances for member states. So I think our assessment is pretty clear. We know what needs to be done, but the member states needs to be reassured that there is enough progress at some point in 2022 to move ahead and to close chapters. So in other words, to maintain a certain dynamic of the process. With Serbia, we stated that sufficient progress has been achieved to go ahead. So first of all, we note or acknowledge the wish of Serbia to open Cluster 3, competitiveness and inclusive growth, and Cluster 4, green agenda and sustainable connectivity. So we took it to the Council, and the member states are still discussing. There was a round of comments on the state of play by EU affairs ministers yesterday. They didn't go into all the details. So they basically refer to the state of play of fundamentals, where, of course, it's a mixed picture. We are not there yet, so there are still a lot of issues with regard to the rule of law and fight against corruption and freedom of expression. But we think that when it comes to the opening benchmarks for those clusters, they have been fulfilled. So we could go ahead. We need to have all the member states on board. I don't want to speculate. I don't to prejudge any decisions, because they will be taken in due time, meaning in roughly 3 weeks from now. But I think we are getting there. So I also remember very well the tonality of the discussion on Serbia last year and now. So there's clearly a difference. So progress, it may be imperfect, but there is progress. There is a certain trend, so we can at least move ahead and make sure that it's feasible for everyone. The case of Kosovo, it is related to Serbia because of the Serbia-Kosovo dialogue. Unfortunately, not much progress has been achieved there, and we had some bumps in the road, like the recent flare-up of tension with regard to the car license plate. I mean, that came after the reporting period, but it added to the tension. So I think that I don't think so. I know member states are genuinely worried, and I was there at the discussion of the foreign ministers a week ago. A lot of them spoke about the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue and the need to make progress, because we know it's a prerequisite for enlargement par excellence. But otherwise, one conclusion that we repeat in the report is that we think it's time to deliver on visa liberalization for Kosovo. So this is it's long overdue. There's not much Kosovo can do. So it takes a political decision, but we once again state that it is, I mean, it should happen. Not much good news for Bosnia in the report, and the reactions were not overwhelming for understandable reasons. Actually, the situation deteriorated after that, and as we speak, Commissioner Varhelyi is in Bosnia discussing with the leadership how to overcome this institutional stalemate in the country that basically has stalled the whole process, because not much progress has been achieved with regard to the 14 conditions to grant the candidate status to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So that's not much change. Not much change there. I will not comment on Turkey. The conclusions on Turkey were roughly the same as last year, that the accession process remains effectively at a standstill. So now we are working discussing with the member states the council conclusions. I will not hide from you that the ongoing dispute between Bulgaria and North Macedonia casts a long shadow on this discussion. It's a bilateral issue. It's very sensitive. It's all about history and identity, and we've tried our best last year and also in 2021 to find a way ahead, but we are not there yet. And as you know, Bulgarians went to the polls for the third time already. So now there is very little time to find an agreement on with North Macedonia that would allow opening of negotiations. We are not giving up hopes, but of course this is something we cannot just solve within our Brussels bubble, obviously. So finding consensus will not be easy. We are talking to the Slovenian presidency on a daily basis, and then see how we can help. We still have 3 weeks to go, so it's a very tight race, and we still have high ambitions for December. So actually, up to 4 important different decisions could be taken. So let's see where we land. But we really want to avoid even a greater disillusionment. It's not only that we care about the countries in the region, we do, of course, but also not finding consensus on the conclusions or on the opening of accession negotiations or the clusters would deal another blow to the enlargement policy of the EU and its credibility. It is an important policy field which is being driven from the top, not only by Commissioner Varhelyi, but President von der Leyen herself was really into that, and she is really into a lot of details of the process, because before she went on her tour, the DG we spent 2 hours briefing her, and I was really very positively surprised by her interest in different, very specific aspects of our policy. So the political steel is certainly there, as are the difficulties and challenges, which I hope we'll be able to overcome. I'll stop here, and I'm really looking forward to your comments, because I know I want to understand what you think about the mother of all packages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Popovski, for the introduction and for giving us definitely some good material to work with in the further discussion. So you said that the package hasn't made anyone entirely happy, which means that you have done a good job. So let's hear from the think tank communities and see if you have made the think tanks and the civil society happy. To kick off the discussion, I will invite Srđan Majstorović to begin. Srđan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Milena, and thank you very much, Mr. Popovski, for keeping this, I would say, very positive tradition that we are slowly but surely building in discussing these issues, and basically using this exercise to remind ourselves of the importance of a dialogue between all the relevant stakeholders in the process of the EU accession. Something that perhaps is taken for granted for ourselves, but something that we are sincerely lacking. I'm speaking on behalf of a Serbian civil society organizations, where we have mechanisms of discussion with the government, but it seems that it is more formal than substantial exchange on how to include stronger and more substantially civil society in the EU accession process. And I'm starting with this because I have the experience of both negotiating as a member of Serbia's EU accession negotiation team and as a civil society representative, and I see the gaps which needs to be obviously fulfilled. And as I said, this kind of an exchange and constructive dialogue is something that needs to be recognized by our government as well as an important aspect of the EU accession process. Now, what to say about the report that is, as you said, mother of all reports, which is already 1 month and some days old. It's very difficult to find a new angle. I think it was very important for us to hear from you about the method, the fashion that these reports are being produced, and how difficult it is sometimes to acquire the consensus on what is in these reports. From the perspective of Serbian civil society organization, the assessment of, as you call it, limited progress, especially in the area of judicial reform and freedom of expression, have drawn particular attention from the, as I said, expert community, think tankers, as well as media. The assessment is an example of how, unfortunately, only formal steps taken by the government, or as we call it, ticking the box, essentially hides the lack of substantial progress, and in a way distorts the perception of a real situation on the ground, and how this undermines the credibility of the EU accession process under existing rules. And this is something that we need to jointly look much closer into and try to find a common ground how to proceed in the future. Looking across the report for Serbia, it is obvious that Serbia has not achieved a tremendous progress. General assessment is that report focus on, as I said, formal improvements, such as adoption of legislative acts, strategies, or action plans, while unfortunately stopping short from calling spade a spade. And this is exactly, as I said, the box thinking approach that was supposed to be overcome and addressed by the new accession methodology, which unfortunately is not bearing the positive fruits thus far. You mentioned the failure of opening of the accession talks with Albania and North Macedonia, and the failure to achieve a consensus on visa liberalization with Kosovo. And I'm afraid until we address these substantially important issues for the future of enlargement with the political steering and political will that is mentioned in the new methodology, the methodology will not bear the wanted fruits. What is characteristic of this year's report is something that you already mentioned. We recognize the use of different language, or tonality, as you put it, compared to the previous year. Language was much softer in the case of Serbia and carefully balanced. There is no mentioning of the state capture elements, regardless of reality being supported by the very finding of the report itself, which says that there is a political influence over judiciary. There is a high number of acting senior management positions still still being not resolved. Abuse of legislative processes and public institutions in restricting civil society. So this is something that obviously we would care to hear it much more straightforward in order to have the legitimacy and credibility as expert community to call upon and say, you see, this is a problem, this is assessed by the European Commission. In general, we need clearer messages, we need clearer data, because otherwise the effects of these reports are not going to be reflected in the reality and from the perspective that we want to see those. Unfortunately, the reports are non-issue in the public debates, especially in Serbia. They are contributing to the increase of skepticism when not addressing the spade a spade, as I mentioned. They are being perceived as expert documents, which are not an easy reader for a broader public, which was always the case. But some of the findings, I'm afraid, and the effects of those issues mentioned in the report are contributing to the phenomenon that even EU pro-European opposition is becoming more and more skeptical with regards the credibility of the process, based on the fact that it seems that the European Union is much more interested in these 50 shades of stability, autocratic stability being exercised in the region, rather than addressing the value-based reforms in reality. I've been warned by Milena already, so I will stop here, and I'm looking forward to discussion.
Thank you, Srđan. I hate to interrupt, especially when the comments are really very pertinent and to the point, but we do have another 5 discussants, and we should leave some time for the audience, and I'm sure that other discussants will also have very, very good and pertinent comments. So without further ado, I give the word to Ardita Bazi-Meri from Skopje to give us the Macedonian point of view on the report.
Thank you, Milena. Thank you, Mr. Popowski, and hello to everybody. In the very beginning, I would use this opportunity actually to express how saddened we were with a bus accident that happened yesterday, actually, and many lives were lost, and that we express actually our deepest condolences to the families. And now back to the report. Well, evidently, this year's enlargement package was, as already mentioned, overshadowed by the blocked accession path of North Macedonia and Albania, and the inability of the EU member states actually to adopt a decision on the start of the accession negotiations. So this inability to reach consensus points to internal dysfunctionalities in the EU approach towards the region. And as it is stated in the report itself, we also agree that clearly damages the EU credibility. In this kind of a setting, the Commission remained behind the main findings and recommendations regarding the opening of accession negotiations. These recommendations are supported by the assessment, actually, that North Macedonia continues to meet the conditions for holding the first intergovernmental conference, considering actually that it has maintained a steady and determined pace in implementing the EU reforms, particularly in the areas of rule of law and including fight against corruption and organized crime. The report itself, Mr. Popowski mentioned, actually has been changed structurally, but not methodologically. So we have grouping of clusters, of chapters in clusters, with only change sequence of the order of the chapters and summing up of the main findings per chapter, but this only indicates that there is still lack of the cluster logic in the preparation of the report. This does not provide actually a clear direction for our countries and other stakeholders in the monitoring process as to how we or they should adapt, if at all. For our countries, the application of a developed cluster logic may require some structural changes, and the prolonged absence actually of a clear guidelines does not help in this regard. In most of the clusters, North Macedonia has been assessed as moderately prepared to take actually the obligations of the EU membership, with visible differences between the separate chapters in the clusters. There are some positive examples where there are steady results achieved under Chapter 12, Food Safety, Veterinary Phytosanitary Policy, and Chapter 29. Under Chapter 12, there is good level of preparedness, which has been maintained since 2016. And same as last year, the situation under this chapter has been assessed with good progress. And this is especially important having considering the complexity of this chapter. And also the situation with Chapter 29 customs unions is similar, actually. There is good progress under this chapter, but with the Commission establishes that the legislation in the custom area is at high level of alignment with the European acquis. And as regards the level of preparedness and specific chapters, in general terms, there have been no changes since 2019, with only slight differences compared with such assessments prior to 2019. Despite that, the fact that the country was making progress in this period, especially under certain chapters, the fact this did not result in better overall assessment of preparedness to assume membership obligation. So in this situation where the level of progress has generally been moderate for several years, but the level of preparedness does not change, the accession basically itself resembles a process in which the country moves a shifting or a moving target. So we do understand that such situation is a consequence of the long-term nature of the accession process, the continual amendments to the European legislation, as well as the general lack of political will within the EU for the enlargement process. And seen from the viewpoint of a membership candidate country, such support does not ensure the required reform impetus. And this may be discouraging for the countries and especially for the public administration that bears most of the weight of these reforms. As already said by Mr. Popowski, the commitment to implement the priorities set in the political criteria, and additionally in combination with bilateral issues outside the objective membership criteria, and which will continue in the past also to be more emphasized, seems to be draining energy from other clusters. And this is worrisome for several reasons. First, it results in stagnation in many other areas. And if continued, it will result in the future as well. And it also, secondly, indicates a lack of mobilization of sufficient resources to implement the process, or inadequate mobilization of the resources. And thirdly, it may have also serious implications on the use of the economic and investment plan funds, which in turn are linked to other clusters. You're giving me, I have only 2 points also for the end. The level of recommendations, as already mentioned by Srdjan, remains unbalanced and uneven, and their impact on the formulation of the assessment of progress and preparedness is basically unclear. And the methodology of the report does not show a clear approach to dealing with recurring recommendations, nor it does suggest basically a way in which they should or are expected to be approached. The existence of such mechanism could encourage continuous and systematic action towards addressing these recommendations. Thank you, Milena.
Thank you, Ardita. Sorry again to cut you off. We know that there is a lot to cover here. Thank you for mentioning also the methodological aspect. I think that is probably a valuable comment also for Mr. Popowski. I will now invite Arbresha to speak next. If other colleagues don't disagree. And to provide us with the point of view from Kosovo. Arbresha, please go.
Thank you very much, Milena, and others for accommodating my request. I agree with Ardita's comments on methodological part, and also what the previous speaker said in general. And I would like to touch upon some issues which bother us, not only this time when we have a new report and a new approach or methodology, but I believe it's something that it's in a way bothering us for a long time now. The first thing I want to touch upon is assurance for a common future. And even this time when we saw the reports, the main comment is that the uncertainty remains. And I think the Western Balkans definitely cannot live in a limbo. Uncertainties on its future are so high, even now, that no one believes, or very few people believe, in most of the Western Balkan countries, but also in some of the EU countries, that there is a future for the Western Balkans in EU at possible. So I think that part of the blame for this is, sorry. No, I'm sorry if you're hearing noise. I will try. I have speakers. Maybe. Yeah, maybe you can hear me now. Better. Thanks. So I think part of the blame for this is also with the EU itself. The almost pure intergovernmental nature of the enlargement policy of the EU, and of course, this is partly due to the funding treaties construction. It makes it hard to strategize on future enlargement, that basically nothing can nowadays be credibly promised. And we have seen that even lately in some of the statements. Domestic politics over enlargement is another dimension, which in certain EU member states is strong enough to prevent leaders from tolerating an acceleration of the enlargement process. Balkan governments, people and discourse in general perceive this picture as utterly hurtful. Domestic initiatives to rely on European integration, which is foreseen as a motor for domestic change, have started to somehow seem comic lately in many countries. Less and less people rely and trust that motor, primarily because the EU cannot assure anyone on a future on the future of enlargement. The EU, I believe, should prevent this in the first place by changing the discourse on the Western Balkans. The EU member states must project a strategy that is clear, certain, and sufficient to assure the Western Balkan states on their future on the EU. That strategy should have clear indicators of performance to prevent the regatta principle, one which should be reliable, transparent, and visible, and also set rules for governments and people to rely on their domestic politics and accountability. So I think this is what would make accountability, conditionality policy work, but also pull the democratic consolidation discourse in exchange of harmful plans. Second point that I would touch is I would argue for a stronger conditionality policy towards some of the Western Balkan countries, because labeling themselves as pro-European, some leaders in our region are at the same time moving towards autocracy, capture of the state, abuse of the law, and also in some cases even anti-European in essence, although framed and pictured differently. A conditionality policy that would allow partnership with governments which eat from both hands, from West and from Russia, I think should no longer persist. And also for those who stand for rule of law and favor criminal clientelists at the same time and formally stand for free election are in the same time buying media. And this is, I think, questionable, and it doesn't work. Therefore, I would propose a conditionality policy that would start from top principles. One that bans cooperation with government leaders and presidents who are obviously autocrats, who oppose liberal values of peace and cohabitation, who run counter to the principle of their own laws, and who promote anti-European values in their domestic governance in general. A conditionality policy that tolerates this serious abuse of law in the Western Balkans, I consider is at best ironic. Therefore, the EU's conditionality policy should be clear on all Western Balkan countries, no European future for countries that are run by corrupt governments, by those who promote nationalism and historical narratives that trigger conflicts, by those who work to divide societies and territories, or by those who use their power to deepen their partisan clientele. So a fundamental change in this policy is essential, a clear no to stabilityocracy, and a powerful yes to democratization is required. So this would need to be reflected in allies with the Western Balkan countries, supporting those liberal, progressive forces that credibly stand for democratization and reject those who oppose it. I would stop here. I would have one more point, but I think my time has run up.
Yes, I have given you one minute extra, like to the previous discussants. I'm giving everybody one extra minute. Thank you, Brescia. Your comments were also a bit wider and somehow, let's say, captured the complexities of the overall youth conditionality policy. We will see what will Mr. Popowski be able to comment on that aspect of the comments, which also go outside of the, let's say, specific enlargement package for this year. But it would be an interesting discussion for sure. I will now give the floor to Haris Yutahia from Sarajevo.
Hello from Sarajevo, and on behalf of the Foreign Policy Initiative, BH. First and foremost, I agree with the assessment presented in the package regarding Bosnia and Herzegovina, at least in the terms of progress made thus so far. It's stated there, despite the fact that all political parties declare the EU membership is the #1 goal of the BAH foreign policy, the strategic goal of the EU integration has not been translated into concrete action. Since May 2019, when we received the Commission's 14 key priorities, we have addressed only 3 minor issues, technical ones, exactly, that didn't really require real work, while all the meaningful reforms remain outstanding. Political parties, at least some of them, are actually attempting to use the integration process to advance their own agenda, even with the support of some member countries, undermining the overall EU policy toward the region and Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the EU's ability to speak with one voice. And that's the thing that the EU is actually asking for from us. As you are probably aware, the integration process is being hampered by the current political crisis, which is the worst in the last 25 years. There are serious attempts to reverse the political crisis, the reform process, as well as clear messages of determination to dissolve the country. You are all aware of this. This would be disastrous for Bosnia and Herzegovina and the region. The EU must intervene more forcefully, as other actors, namely Russia and China, you are aware, are seizing the opportunity to act in their own self-interest, thus supporting one side of the political conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You have seen this in the EU Security Council when they actually refused to give legitimate the High Representative, and that's one of the things that are really worrisome. That the side that I'm talking about in the political conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina is actually also trying to legitimize its efforts by soliciting support from the representatives of specific member states, while the EU actually remains silent. As the European Union faces the challenge of enlargement, the crisis of integration in the candidate and potential candidate countries should not be overlooked. The EU must reconsider its enlargement policy and provide more countries involved, as the membership perspective that's being repeated from year to year, and the sole pre-accession funds are clearly not sufficient. So I'll stop here in order to save some time for Milena, and I'm looking forward to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Haris. Thank you very much for sticking to the time limit. I think that I can now immediately proceed with Marko Stošić from Marko, go ahead.
Thanks, Milena. So regarding Montenegro, the situation was very interesting this year because we have these particular circumstances where, for the first time in my lifetime, the previous dominant party, DPS, is now looking at the report from the opposition benches, and the former opposition, which has until recently only read the negative parts of the European Commission reports, was now kind of defending it. So the report itself was very critical. It showed limited progress in 30 out of 33 chapters, and also under chapter 23, it assessed that situation was worse than last year, so with no progress compared to limited progress. So, and also very critical and open in some instances, such as there was a very specific sentence that was quoted many times in our media, which said that some key ministries have failed to show sufficient commitment and constructive engagement in the EU accession process under the new leadership. This was a very much quoted sentence, and I think it has been true. I'll give you a couple of examples. The government spent more than 6 months trying to establish the working groups for chapter 23 and 24. My working group, of which I am a member, the most exciting one for financial control, chapter 32, hasn't met for a year or more, and we have no indication when this will happen. So there has been, on behalf of the new government, some sort of, I would say, although the vision is clear, there seemed to be some kind of a confusion in the process, or at least stalling. But now with the EC report, we proposed its key recommendations and priority issues to be formulated into a special action plan, which could be the lowest common denominator for both the government, political parties, and civil society to come together and to create a sort of an action-oriented plan to achieve, as Mr. Popowski said, which are priorities, which are interim benchmarks, particularly in the area of judiciary. In Montenegro right now, all the appointments in the judiciary, such as constitutional court judges, prosecutorial council members, Supreme State prosecutor, they are all being now at a standstill. There needs to be a consensus among political parties, not a consensus, but at least a cross-party discussion and an agreement. And we don't have it. So in a way, we are held hostage by our political parties, by their inability to find common ground and to find a consensus about issues of national importance, which are also key requirements for the EU. So that's our main story: judiciary and nominations, appointment in that area, where we hope to achieve some progress. But as you know, we are in the middle of a political crisis. Every day we wake up and ask ourselves, is this the day that the government is going to fall, or be reconstructed, or be replaced, or new elections scheduled? So it's a very unstable and difficult time to conduct these far-reaching and serious reforms that we need. But we hope that everything will be okay, and that the next DC report will be much more positive. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Marko. To you as well for sticking to the time limit, and also for kind of showing a bit of an out-of-the-box picture of how actually the report for Montenegro reads from the new context, the new political reality in Montenegro. I think that was a very useful angle that you gave there. And now, last but certainly not the least, Đerđe Vurmo, Program Director of IDM in Albania. Đerđe, go ahead.
Hi, hello from Tirana as well, from IDM, Institute for Democracy and Mediation. Well, talking about the mother of all packages, as Mr. Popowski put it, these days looks much like a funeral. Sorry, but it really does. Like a funeral where people, instead of mourning the dead guy, they discuss about how to make the dead guy's dead fish look better. And I'm sorry to say that, but it really, that's what it looks like. Because the problem the enlargement is facing these days, or in the past 2-3 years, like desperately, is the EU's credibility. I'm not a fan of the new methodology. People in the panel know it, simply because the new methodology is neither new nor any kind of methodology. But anyway, I don't think that a new methodology would solve what's the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that EU credibility is dead. And it's not dead just this year. It's not dead because last year the EU failed to open accession talks with Albania and Macedonia. It's dead because in the past decade, the EU enlargement has failed to lead the region towards rule of law, democracy, as much as we ourselves did fail in doing so. So that's what the talk about EU and the role in the region should be about. There is nothing more I can add to all the colleagues that spoke in the panel. I fully agree with all of them, but I really think that we need to focus more on how to revive the EU's credibility. Enlargement is a political process. It's not a technical process. With all due respect of the European Commission's work and efforts and tireless measures that it undertakes. But at the end of the day, it boils down to this. EU enlargement is political process that requires firm political actors and decisions. So in my opinion, there are two questions that the EU needs to answer honestly. One, does the EU really want enlargement? And two, does the EU consider EU enlargement a strategic priority for the Union? In order for us to move more firmly in the process forward, the answer for both these questions need to be yes. Not yes to the first one and no to the second one, because that's what we've been facing in the past decade. In the past decade, the question has been, does the EU mind enlargement? And the answer has been, no, the EU doesn't mind enlargement, but I don't really want enlargement. And that's where it led, the EU enlargement in the past decade, and that's where it led the region. In the past decade, at least in the past 5 years, you've seen Serbia going, declining in terms of democracy. You've seen the same thing happening in Albania, in some other Western Balkan countries. So if the answer to these questions is yes, then the EU needs to give a sign that it's serious about it. And how to do it? It needs to open accession talks, in my opinion. Forget the new methodology. The EU needs to open accession talks with all 6 Western Balkan countries. The EU needs to lead the region towards peace. How does it? How do you do that? By proving yourself as a powerful player in the region, not by leaving Kosovo-Serbia dialogue to go ahead, because that's a dead end. So on one hand, you have 5 non-recognizers in the EU who say, I will not recognize Kosovo as long as Serbia does not agree, and you ask Serbia to agree on recognizing Kosovo. That's not going to happen, never. Lead the region towards rule of law and democracy unconditionally, not by paying lip service to Rama, to Vučić, to whoever comes in power next time. the EU finally needs to lead its own members towards fully fledged rule of law and democracy. What we're witnessing in Hungary and Poland is because of the fact that the EU has kept silence on development in these countries. And that has affected EU's credibility. And God thanks, I mean, we're not blind. We see that in the region. So if you ask me about what should we be talking about, I think this is what the EU and us need to focus on solving. But if you insist on talking about how to make the dead fish look nicer, then that is the methodology. Then a couple of things that the colleagues mentioned, and I think it's crucial. First of all, there is a huge gap between what the EU, what the European Commission report perceived and sell as a reality, and what the reality is here. In almost all country reports, you can witness that. So on one hand, the EU is trying to be so polite and politically correct by even not specifically stating all the facts. And there are situations like that in Serbia's report, in Albania's report, in Kosovo's report. In Kosovo, for instance, you have the president of the republic that does not agree with the situation. Secondly, you need to quote and you need to embark on what are the findings and other recommendations from civil society. Every year you ask us what do we think about the progress. Every year we come to the EU delegation and state our facts. And at the end, when we read the reports in autumn, we find those facts nowhere in the report. I mean, I'm sorry, don't be surprised if more and more, if less and less, sorry, CSOs show up in those reports, in those consultations at the EU delegations. Finally, stop being so politically correct. I mean, you're a technical. You need to lead a technical process, right? You're not the political part. That's for the EU member states. And that has other kinds of repercussions. But if you go by a technical methodology, then autocratic government is autocratic. Decline in rule of law is a decline. Media freedom in decline is media freedom in decline. I mean, you can invent other words, whatever, but okay, I'll stop here, sorry.
Okay, Jerzy, since you were the last discussant, I gave you a little bit more time, but somehow you rounded up where Srđan started about the necessity to call a spade, and basically this is, I think, an important message. Mr. Popowski, I know that you are overwhelmed right now. I hope you didn't expect to have an easy time with the region's leading think tanks. And I am sure that you are not surprised with at least some of the comments which you have heard from my colleagues. Now, we have 20 minutes for the discussion. I have a number of questions from the audience. So I will read out the several questions from the audience, and then I will give you the time to connect them, I think, and address those that you feel are the most pertinent. Then I will give also the floor for 1 minute reactions to the discussants again. And in the end, I think we should have a couple of minutes for you to give your final remarks. So the questions from the audience say, first of all, Mr. Popowski, you've mentioned the 4 pillars of the revised methodology. How would you rate their actual implementation in practice? In other words, has the process truly become more credible, predictable, dynamic, and strongly politically steered? Many would argue that nothing has changed and that the revised methodology has remained underutilized in practice. Another question, actually all questions are to Mr. Popowski. The reports of the Commission appear to be increasingly seen with some skepticism in EU member states when it comes to their genuine assessment of the situation on the ground. What is DG NEAR doing to address such skepticism? Please let us know what are your thoughts on the cross-European initiative which has proposed breaking the enlargement impasse by introducing the model of staged accession. If you don't know what this question is referring to, and I don't have the name who it was asked by, because I'm getting it from the chat function from the other Zoom account. I can say a few words about that if that will be useful. The next question, and I just want to ask you, Mr. Popowski, do you want me to read them out all together and you write them down and then pick them up, or do you want me to be more, let's say, to separate them? Because we have been receiving questions in the chat all throughout the discussion. Would you like me to stop here with the questions and then to give you a second round? Would you
perhaps I'll take those few and then also react to comments by colleagues briefly, so that I don't monopolize. First, thank you. I mean, for all the criticism, I'm perfectly fine with that. That's my day job. And by the way, I feel vindicated because we didn't make you happy either. Imagine if I heard just words of praise from you. Probably I would have a major problem with most of the governments in the region. We always have to find a middle ground. By the way, what I forgot to say, I mean, the report is the result of a lot of teamwork. It's not that we have a really capable team of drafters in the House, but they have to reconcile different positions. So every year we have a lot of discussions with DG Just on the judiciary and the rule of law, and with DG Home on migration, and then with DG Environment on environment. And then we need to find a middle ground, because then it's a report approved by the College of Commissioners, and the process of adoption may be actually quite lively. I admit it's not always easy reading. I think it was Sergeant who said it, because sometimes we use cryptic language because we want to find this middle ground. It's not always easy. I would, of course, defend the way we drafted our own methodology. It has served its purpose for many years. We are not too, we are prescriptive to a certain extent, but in the end, it's for the governments to decide how they would go about the recommendations by the European Commission. Of course, the European legislation, the whole framework is evolving. In a way, it's a moving target, has always been. That will never change, which adds to this feeling of uncertainty. I understand that. And on conditionality, conditionality is there. I mean, the fact that we don't make quick progress has to do with the fact that we don't give an easy right. I mean, to anyone. And of course, in a way, progress is reversible, because if we see that there is serious backsliding, that we basically, it basically means that the whole process can grind to a halt. It has happened in the past, and it's actually the case with Turkey, which is, another candidate in a different part of the world. Now, briefly on the three specific questions that you read out, Milena. On the four pillars, it was the first year, but I think that the political steer is visibly there. You may or may not like it. The fact that the member states don't agree, for instance, with our recommendations means they want to steer the whole accession process to in a certain direction. It doesn't make us entirely happy, but that's the way it is. The credibility remains a challenge, and we are not shy to admit it, that there is a serious risk that everything will fall apart if we once again fail to come up with a clear message to the region, and if we fail to make sufficient progress, which is perfectly possible based on our assessment. The member states indeed remain skeptical, not all of them. You still have a visible and vocal group of friends of enlargement. No, we talk to them. It's not that we go to the council and listen to their interventions, that it's not good enough. No, we really talk a lot bilaterally. Commissioner Varela is talking to EU ministers and foreign ministers. I do as well. We have a lot of exchanges. And believe me, there is a lot of interest. Even during the lockdown, I've been talking to the capitals regularly. on enlargement and the challenges and pros and cons, and in particular to the countries that have a particular, I mean, some issues or expectations. So of course we do a lot of it, and we also do a lot of public diplomacy. Events of that kind, but also targeting the European audiences. And I do roughly 40 per year, online and then in person whenever possible. And now on the stage accession, I mean, I have my own views because I've seen it before when Poland was a candidate country, and there was a lot of fear in the 90s that a big bank accession was something too big to digest for the European Union. So many scholars have come up with alternative models of Can Europa, consenting circles, and kind of things of that kind. I think there are certain limits. What we have proposed in the new methodology is this concept of early integration. So trying to extend some benefits and participation in certain bodies to the candidate countries short of the actual accession. That is feasible. We still need to develop that to give it some more granularity. But I think that staged accession would be quite difficult to define. I mean, well, you may counter the view. You wanted to comment on that, so perhaps I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Popowski. I will refrain from commenting on the staged accession because it's our initiative here, but I will make sure to send you the detailed template with this proposal, and we can have another discussion about that hopefully very soon. Since there are many questions, I will read out two more, and then I will give the floor actually three more, sorry, and then I will give the floor to the discussants for very short reactions. One question reads, due to the fact that the Western Balkan accession to the EU is unlikely to happen this decade, do you believe that common regional market and prospective Western Balkan integration into the European economic area could be a good interim solution for the region? Another question reads, what is the European Commission doing at communication level to increase the level of support to enlargement in the Western Balkan region? The last question, it's kind of a complex question, but bear with me. How would you assess the recent Open Balkan initiative? To what extent do you think it is complementary to the regional common regional market initiative? So maybe you can connect that with the common regional market question. Do you think that it can provide faster accession to for the states that are included in the initiative, or does it make EU accession more complex and complicated? And do you think that the rest of the Western Balkan countries should join the initiative? So I think these two questions are well connected, and the third one is on communication.
It's for me again.
Back to you, Mr. Popowski. I mean, the questions were for you. All the questions were for you.
No, but I don't want to monopolize this. So, look,
well, since you are the presenter of the package, and we have, everyone else is a discussant in this case, I think that it was expected that most of the questions would be for you.
Fair enough. Please go ahead. Look, on the Open Balkans, in a way, of course, it is connected to this broader concept of regional integration or common regional market. Look, the baseline for us is inclusivity. So for the time being, it's just 3 countries that decided to come up with an initiative. We share the logic, but we still would like to maintain this inclusive approach. And this is and in a way that was the rationale behind the common regional market for the Balkans, which is a stepping stone to accession. It's not a substitute. It has never been meant as a substitute. It has never been conceived as a substitute. So there is some complementarity, but of course, whichever regional initiative emanates from the countries themselves, it has a certain advantage. I mean, because that's exactly what we would like to promote. That started at in Berlin a couple of years ago. and we are really willing to promote that, but it's still a long way ahead of us. The communication, there is never enough of it, of course, I admit. We actually we are quite active on social media. We have a number of initiatives through the delegations and then a separated budget line. We have different networks that we use, but it's a constant struggle. It's not that we launch one big campaign and then it will be over. It never works like that. Again, it brings back an experience from Poland. We also thought at some point in the 90s that we need to launch a major campaign in favor of Polish accession, and then it would change everybody's mind. Of course, it didn't. This is something you have to do constantly, everywhere, and even more so, as I said, we need to target our own audiences, because this is exactly. I mean, there is a lot of either resistance or fear or ignorance or a mix of everything in our own member states, and there we have to be very active, and we are. But of course, there is always room for improvement.
Okay, Mr. Popowski, thank you for that honest answer when it comes to communication, especially. There is one more question that I will read out now because I think it is important not to omit it, even though we are a bit pressed for time. So I would just ask you, Mr. Popowski, for a very short and concrete answer. And the question goes, when it comes to Roma, some 2021 annual reports omit existence of anti-Gypsyism and structural discrimination. Others only indirectly admit their existence. This is not a comprehensive assessment of the state of play and doesn't reflect reality on the ground. Why does the Commission make anti-Gypsyism and structural discrimination invisible? Inclusion of Roma is crucial with regard to fundamental rights. Just please.
I agree. No, we are not trying to hide it, and it is a structural issue, and we've done a lot of work. But it is not mentioned.
I mean, this commentator is saying that they are not mentioned in the annual reports.
Look, then I would have to revisit it. I don't know the report by heart, believe me. But this is certainly something it's high on the agenda. It's something that the Commissioner Varhelyi is really looking into, and we also have a Roma advisor in DG NEAR who's dealing exclusively with the issue.
Okay, that is good to know. I think that in terms of awareness raising, I think it was good to address this question. There is also another one again about your opinion on the staged accession model, but I think it would be unfair to ask you to comment on that further without giving you first the chance to read out the proposal. I don't know who is asking each of the questions because I'm just getting them forwarded. I don't know if these are people from my team or not. I hope not, and I hope that this means that our template has also reached some wider audiences. But we will make sure to organize another discussion on this and invite you, Mr. Popowski, very soon. I will now give the floor very shortly, but I would really like to ask all of my colleagues just be very brief, 1 minute. Key ending notes, and I will now go in the reverse order, starting from Georgi. If you have anything to add, Georgi, after the discussion.
No, really. I mean, I don't think I have anything substantial to add. I mean, Milena, you know very well because I declined some of the offers to speak at some similar events this year, and the reason was that I can't force myself to be more optimistic or even diplomatic. I mean, I'm really sorry. So maybe I shouldn't be talking, but my point is we can continue talking about the dead fish, but that will not bring to life the EU credibility. I mean, up to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Georgi. Marco?
Well, I completely agree with my colleagues, and I understand Georgi's frustration and frustration of others. In Montenegro, we also for a long time tried to persuade the European Commission to give us a more concrete, more critical overview of what we saw was state capture and rampant corruption in our society. Now we ask for the same for the new government, to be kept under very watchful eye, and I think that this new report manage to do this. And it will serve as a roadmap to domestic political actors who I just hope will find a common ground, and I implore the European Commission to try to mediate, because the differences are very great and there doesn't seem to be an agreement in the horizon.
Thank you, Marco. Next, I hope I'm not getting the order wrong. I think I have Haris next.
Thank you. I'll also be short. I really tend to agree with some of the colleagues that said that the EU should stop being politically correct in the reports, as well as in the media, and when talking to politicians and people. Actually, they should call out more vocally the blockers of the European integration process. It's especially happening here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We've got politicians that are calling themselves as leaders of the European integration process, but they are actually their political activity results in this stalemate that has been enacted for 2.5 years. So the European Union should most definitely be more vocal about it, because people here that are actually electing those politicians don't really know what's the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the European path. Thank you.
Thank you, Haris. Arbresha, I think you're next.
I hope you can hear me well. It's saying my connection is not very stable. I would like to state as the end note that hopefully next year our remarks have been taken into account, and we come and meet once again, but by finding more common ground, and hopefully seeing progress towards credibility, starting from visa liberalization for Kosovo, but also progress with North Macedonia and Albania in opening negotiations. But also, please do take into consideration our comments and remarks. We also send our comments and also inputs for the report, and we hope to see them reflected better in the future.
Thank you, Arbresha. Ardita?
Thank you, Milena. Well, as to the mother of all reports, as already said, as already actually said by former colleagues, it actually provides, it is a useful barometer for the progress in the countries, but however, with little impact in the broader scheme of things. And the case of North Macedonia, it is clearly a sign of a dysfunctionality of the EU approach towards the Western Balkans. In the specific case of North Macedonia, the bilateral disputes by member states paralyzed the accession process. And in this respect, the start of the EU accession negotiation has the potential to be a game changer in undertaking these deep reforms, as shown by the Prespa agreement and the name change of the country. However, what I want to point is that the change in form and not in substance actually won't enhance the process. The Commission actually needs to avoid the technical process in order to have tangible results, I would say at the end.
Thank you, Ardita. And last but not least, Srdjan.
Thanks, Milena. Just two points very shortly. One, I beg to disagree, dear Mr. Popowski, on the nature of the report and of making it not likable for this or that group. The problem that we have with this report is the fact that the difference between the positions of and findings of the civil society organizations and well-respected international organizations who are dealing with the issues of democracy, rule of law, freedom of expressions are too far from what we are reading in the European Commission's report. And the new methodology provides you with the capability of addressing these, or rather accepting these reports as a source of information in order to close this gap that we see. The second point is I think that we need to take a step back and perhaps to look at the sources of the EU enlargement process, go back to the Copenhagen criteria, focus on democratization of our societies rather than just faking the process for the sake of the process. Faking it leads to a disillusionment, to abandonment, to exclusion of citizens, and it will not motivate the governments who are facing the problems with regards to respect of the human rights, democratic functioning of democratic institutions and the rule of law. They're not going to be motivated with this. So we need to be more critical. We need to be more open. This is how partners should go in the future. And the third point, I hate to omit that at the beginning of this session. I would how to put it, convey a serious message of regional solidarity and condolence with our colleagues from Macedonia, and to all of these who are listening to us from Macedonia. The accident that happened yesterday was a real catastrophe, and it was felt throughout the region.
Thank you, Srđan, for ending on the note of solidarity. And I think it would be a perfect demonstration of that neighborly solidarity if Bulgaria was to actually remove its veto now in the light of these tragic events. And maybe perhaps somebody should convey this idea to the Bulgarian authorities in the coming days. I think that in this way we maybe end on a sad note, but I think we add, or we end also on some let's say on a positive note of the need for more solidarity, which I think is extremely important. And I think that one important thing not to forget to mention here is that most of the colleagues have insisted, or maybe have mentioned, this need for the Commission's reports to be more evidence-based in the future in terms of recognizing the inputs of the third parties who are contributing to those reports. So maybe this can be a very concrete proposal coming out of this discussion for the next year's reports. All of us who are writers and the scholars in our think tanks, we know how important it is to quote sources of information. So I think this could be a nice addition to the Commission's methodology in the coming years. Mr. Popowski, do you have, since it is 3 minutes past 5, we started a couple of minutes later, I can give you 1 or 2 minutes in the end for a very final comment.
First of all, of course, I agree on this, the need to show more solidarity, not least against the backdrop of yesterday's tragedy, but in general, and you know, we've been appealing to the member states to show this sense of responsibility for the process. I mean, I know that our credibility is under severe pressure, and I wouldn't declare it that, but as one of you did, but I admit it's not easy, and that's why we have to get our act together on the way we interact with you. I mean, there's always room for improvement. You know, I'm always willing and able to talk and to take advice and to draw on your ideas. We've had many opportunities in the past. I think last time in person was at the Poznan summit, actually. At least I was there with Srđan for sure, because we were seated together. So I can offer many more opportunities as we go along. And of course, once we close this year's report, we immediately start working on the next year's edition. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of life.
Thank you, Mr. Popowski. Thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss with you, to ask you all the hard questions and to make all the hard comments. And I know that, you know, despite the fact that they may sound hard, I know that you recognize their sincerity and the real concern for the future of our countries that are indeed in the essence of all of those comments. Thanks also to the audience. You have been great and very active. Thank you so much for all the questions and comments that you asked. I'm sorry that I could not maybe read all the questions and all the comments from the chat this time, but we will make sure to remain in constant dialogue and to organize additional new events, and hopefully we will have Mr. Popowski joining us for another discussion very soon. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a pleasant afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.